It has been over 5 years since Mets former top pitching prospect Matt Allan threw in a game. The good news, he is finally on his way to a return.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets. Your first $5 bet wins. Download the app right at FanDuel.com to get started. Well, on today's show, we're going to go through various topics out of Mets camp, but the most prominent one, I think, was Matt Allan. You saw stories written by Newsday, MLB.com, and The Athletic as the Mets' former top pitching prospect spoke with the media about his long progression coming back from now multiple elbow surgeries. He is healthy. He appears ready to go. He has been throwing in sides and bullpens and live BP, and he should be getting into some game action in minor league camp. He's expected to get an assignment to one of the Mets minor league affiliates, and he will resume a career that was once very promising when the Mets drafted him in the third round back in 2019. Now he'll finally get on the mound for the first time since 2019. For those of you who don't remember Matt Allan was drafted by Brodie Van Wagenen. It was his first draft, well, I guess first of two drafts that he ended up conducting as the head baseball man for the Mets. And there was a lot made about the pick of Matt Allan because Brodie Van Wagenen employed a strategy that many teams do where they try to sign some guys over slot, they under slot, pretty much all of their other draft picks. They draft a bunch of 4-year college players that pretty much have no choice but to sign. And Matt Allan got a huge portion of the Mets bonus pool, $2.5 million for a third round pick, which is essentially first round money to get him to turn down his commitment to go to the University of Florida and sign with the New York Mets. Now, we learned in this article, or in this series of articles, they all pretty much follow the same, storylines and tones. I think Tim Healy gave us a couple of, interesting notes that I didn't see in the other two articles for Newsday. So shout out to Tim for what I would maybe do the best with the three articles that I read about, Matt Allan today. But you look back at that draft class again, it was Brett Beatty was the first round pick. Josh Wolf was the second round pick. Matt Allan was the third round pick. And he was really sort of, touted as the steal of the draft for Brodie Van Wagenen and the New York Mets. He was the guy that was supposed to become the Mets' top pitching prospect. But as we learn in these stories, at the time, the elbow was already a concern. And that was part of why he signed at that time instead of going to college, part of why the Mets were able to get him in the third round. Part of it was his commitment to the University of Florida, but also other teams were scared away from this elbow that was giving Matt Allan problems dating back to when he was 15 years old. So he goes out 2019. He does make a series of appearances in rookie ball and affiliates that no longer exist now in minor league baseball with the restructuring that happened after 2020. He struck out 14 batters in 10 1/3 innings pitched, did fine enough. 2021, he reports to big league camp. And Tim Healy noted this in his story. The plan for Matt Allan at the time was to shadow Jacob deGrom because the Mets were looking at Matt Allan as their future ace, and they wanted him to spend a lot of time with their current ace. That is how highly regarded Matt Allan was. Even further, he was a consensus top 100 prospect in baseball. Baseball America had him on their list. Baseball Prospectus had him on theirs. MLB Pipeline had him the highest up at number 75. So this was one of the Mets' top prospects at the time. Again, he was their top pitching prospect. But at the end of camp in 2021, he got shut down. He needed Tommy John surgery, got his first of what would turn into 3 procedures. Less than a year after that first surgery, he needed to get the nerve disposition procedure that often follows Tommy John. Sometimes the TJ procedure works out great. Guys go through their rehab. There's no pain. Everything is perfect. They start to ramp up and all is well. Other guys continue to have pain or sometimes even a lack of feeling in their arm. And so then there is this nerve surgery that is done. Typically, that could solve everything. For Matt Allan, that was not the case. Every time he threw, there was always pain. And that led to a UCL revision surgery. So basically, a second Tommy John in, 2023, trying to find the exact date, February of 2023, when Matt Allan went under the knife again for the third time. Now here we are, 2 years later. Matt Allan is a healthy pitcher in camp. He's up to throwing 97 miles per hour, and he's getting rave reviews, not necessarily just because the stuff is that eye-popping, although people are saying he's as good as he's ever been. He has gone through this long, arduous rehab process, and that does at times give a pitcher the opportunity to really know themselves, know their mechanics in such a specific way. As you're trying to rehab and build up and prevent future injury, you can really find an ideal set of mechanics. And some of the quotes in this story really are talking about how Matt Allan is a much different pitcher than he was when he was first drafted. He's rounded out his arsenal. He has a better changeup and curveball than he did previously. He's added a cutter that was not there when he got drafted. And again, the fastball is up to 97, sitting 94. There's still control issues. He is 5 years removed from, actually at this point, probably getting closer to like 5.5 years removed from pitching in games. But he has not thrown in such a long time against live competition. There really is no telling where the story goes from here for Matt Allan, but it sounds like he's very confident. He talked about how, this process for him has made him a better person, a better player. He is really confident in who he is. And the only thing that's been holding him back all these years is the health. And now that that's not staying in the way, he believes the dream to get up to the big leagues is alive and well again. He said that he doesn't really care where the Mets put him. He said that he's learned throughout this process that he just is going to make the most of wherever his feet hit the ground. That's what he's going to do. He's going to go out there, go about his process, go about his work, and continue to build towards getting to that ultimate goal of pitching in the big leagues. But the Mets have a guy that at one point was as highly regarded as anyone in their system, and he's healthy again. And that is a major story. I can't tell you the amount of times where, for our Locked On Mets insiders or texting service, I get text messages from you guys who tune into the show that have asked me about Matt Allan, or I'll get a comment on Twitter or YouTube, whatever it is, asking me about Matt Allan. And I always say, look, I don't know until he gets back on the mound. And there hasn't even really been many stories written about him since that second Tommy John surgery in 2023. He's always this guy that's in the background. We're always wondering because there was so much hype. Now, at least we're going to see him in games. And I'm not sure if the Mets are going to put him in Port St. Lucie as sort of an extended spring training, let him stay there where he's pretty much had a residency for all these years now, and let him get his first action in low A, a level that he theoretically could dominate as he's now older than a lot of the competition in low A. But at the same time, he's only 23 years old. And one of the stories, I can't remember which one of the writers, it might have been Emily.com, but regardless, they noted how Matt Allan is still younger than Brandon Sproat, a guy that did go to the University of Florida. And, I think spent, was it 3 or 4 years there? The Mets drafted him twice out of the University of Florida, but so I guess 4 years. But regardless, Matt Allan is still a young 23. And so maybe he starts in St. Lucie. Maybe he gets a quick promotion to high A if he doesn't start there. But there's a world where Matt Allan could be pitching in Double A this year. And you have no idea how his stuff is going to play. But if it does, you really never know where this can go. I'm not predicting that Matt Allan's going to make his MLB debut this year. But he could skyrocket through this system a little bit. And if he proves healthy, we'll see what happens. I'm sure the Mets are still going to be very cautious with him, try to protect him as much as they can. But one of the more fascinating notes about all of this, Tim Healy noted this in his story. He said, Matt Allan's going to be a free agent after this year. He's a minor league free agent. He has been in the Mets organization long enough that he will have the right to sign with any team. So the Mets will have a decision to make at the end of this season. They can add him to the 40-man roster and make sure they retain him. Of course, there's always a world where these two sides can talk at the end of the year, and if things have gone well and he wants to stay in the organization, but the Mets don't want to put him on the 40-man roster, they always could negotiate a new minor league deal and keep him in the fold. But that is something that could happen. It could be November next year, and Matt Allan is surprising out to the 40-man roster. And if that happens, that means that he has had a magnificent season where he has proven health and he has reestablished himself as a really promising pitching prospect. You never know. I think there's part of me that says, why even mess with this guy being a starting pitcher? Just see if you can get a high leverage reliever out of him. But look, man, this guy has worked tirelessly to get back on the mound. He has a 4-pitch mix. I imagine he gets a chance to start, and you see what happens here. It's exciting, though, to just think about getting him into games again and seeing what it looks like. It would be pretty incredible if this guy could find his way onto a big league mound in a Mets uniform. It would be one of the more improbable stories that the Mets have had with a prospect, and it's a guy that you have to root for at this point because he was a forgotten man, but still, maybe forgotten man's not even accurate because there was so much hype surrounding Matt Allan when he was drafted that he's always been sort of this kind of shadow in the background of the Mets farm system. Are we ever going to see him again? When's he going to be back on the mound, particularly after the second TJ, where you really had to just cast a ton of doubts if we would ever see him on the mound again? But luckily, things have worked out. That second procedure seemed to work well for him. And hopefully this guy ends up having a long and successful career. It would truly be an incredible story of redemption for a guy that really went through a ton. For a young kid to have your dreams put on hold, time and time again. It's a pretty cool story out of camp. And I think that's why everybody was writing about it today. And that's why I had to open up the show with it. The next segment, we're going to move on to MLB injuries. Frankie Montas is back in Mets camp. I'll give you an update there. The Mets are showing a little bit of interest in Jose Quintana. So we'll go through all that in just a minute. First, though, a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios are one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats that help you feel fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shell varieties. So easy to eat. Reach into the bag, pull out a handful, pop them in your mouth. You're good to go. They're the perfect snack for my desk. I love taking them with me on the go as well. When I'm on the golf course, if I'm on a road trip, whatever it is, Wonderful Pistachios are my number one snack option, especially if you're looking for a snack that does pack that protein punch, because Wonderful Pistachios are a complete protein providing all 9 essential amino acids. And if you like the shells, you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Get snacking and cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Our next goal is to get to 13,000 subscribers by opening day. I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. As we continue our show breaking down various stories out of Mets camp, Frankie Montas is back in the fold. Obviously not throwing yet, but he is back from New York in camp with all the guys. Met with the media a little bit today, said that his shutdown period is actually 4 to 6 weeks, not 6 to 8 weeks. So that was the most notable item that we learned from Montas. He talked about the injury. Obviously, it's frustrating for him, but he said he's already feeling better. The PRP injection really did handle a lot of the inflammation. So he says he feels fine now, though he obviously won't throw for about a month at least. If it is a month, well, you never know. He might be able to get back a lot sooner than we thought. All of a sudden, if he's able to start throwing at the end of camp, start his ramp up process, maybe instead of missing multiple months, maybe he only misses, April and can get back early to not, if not mid-May. But the bottom line here is Frankie Montas is feeling better, which is a good thing. He also mentioned that his shoulder is feeling really good because he was asked, if this had anything to do with the shoulder that gave him so much issues, back in 2022 after his breakout season in 2021. Montas pitched well, but had a shoulder ailment, particularly once they got to the Yankees. He got shut down. He needed shoulder surgery that basically kept him off the mound until last season. He had a healthy year last year altogether, but he really talked about the fact that this was a great offseason for him where he felt as good as ever. It was smooth sailing all the way through. So this injury was very frustrating. But again, when asked about the shoulder, he said the shoulder is feeling great. The two injuries are not connected. And he even said, thank God it's not my shoulder, which to me actually does give me a little more optimism, strangely. I know I threw a little bit of cold water on the idea of him being an impact pitcher for the Mets this year after this injury. And I was probably a little bit too harsh on it. The reason why I thought that Montas might have an uphill battle this year, and he still does to a certain extent. He's going to miss still a good chunk of time. But the thing that concerned me the most is he talked about when he signed with the Mets, what made him better in Milwaukee than with Cincinnati last year is he started to trust his body. And so what concerned me about this injury is, would Montas pitch with doubt again? Would he pitch with doubt that he could let it rip? Because he needs to, as a guy that really does thrive based on his fastball in particular, he needs to feel confident in it. And so the fact that the shoulder is probably such a mental hurdle for him, and this is not a shoulder injury, that leads me to believe that, you know what, if this was just a one-time thing, he was throwing a bullpen, he said he felt some pain in his tricep and it ended up being his lat, hopefully, the inflammation is calmed down as he says it is. He picks up a throwing program in a month that has no pain. He starts ramping up and starts throwing his side sessions, his bullpens, live BPs, gets into games, all that good stuff. And if there's never really any more pain or issues other than one bad bullpen, I don't think there would be as much of a mental hurdle as if this was a shoulder ailment again. So I think that side of it might not be as much of a prominent issue as I had talked about when the injury was initially reported. And so maybe, Montas comes back and he's able to really take off the way we hoped he would this year for the Mets. But in the meantime, you still have a hole in their rotation, and the Mets could lean on their depth. They continue to talk about how much they value their depth. They feel like they did a great job building out a rotation that goes, 8 deep. With that said, you did lose a guy. You have Paul Blackburn and Griffin Canning, who are far from sure things, and Tyler McGill as well, who could be a very streaky pitcher and a guy that can start the year and even spend the entire year of AAA if your other options work out. So now there has been some reporting that has linked the Mets to Jose Quintana. Francis Romero reported that Jose Quintana is attracting interest in the market despite remaining unsigned. He said teams like the Mets, Rangers, and Padres are expected to target the 13th season MLB left-hander in the coming hours per sources. That was earlier today on Wednesday, so it's obviously not happening as of yet. But Pat Ragazzo of Sports Illustrated also connected the Mets to Quintana and said Quintana is very interested in a reunion. Now, I talked about this the other day. To me, this is a no-brainer outside of course, the money, and it's not my money. And Steve Cohen talked the other day, and you can listen to my whole show breaking that down about the payroll. To add on $10 million for Jose Quintana, it's not nothing. That's not cheap. That's going to cost a bunch of luxury tax penalties. But you're also entering a season coming off a NLCS run and your first year with Juan Soto. This is a season to capitalize. This is a season to win the National League East and make another deep playoff run. And heck, you can win a World Series this year. If you have a chance to get a guy that's going to make you significantly better in April and May, I'm taking that chance, because also if Quintana is the guy who was last year, he's going to be better than Canning. He's going to be better than Blackburn. He's going to be better than McGill. And heck, he might be better than Frankie Montas or Clay Holmes as well, guys that have probably more upside than Quintana, but don't have the same floor. Granted, Quintana was streaky last year, and there is a world where maybe that floor does change this year. Maybe he does struggle as he gets another year older. But what I have seen from Jose Quintana in 2 years in the Mets uniform is this is a guy that attacks the zone, that knows how to compete, and a guy that can go through rough stretches, but can make adjustments. And this has never been a pitcher that has been at the top of his game because of stuff. He doesn't have great stuff. He's a guy that if he was a prospect nowadays, with the stuff that he has, he probably wouldn't get a shot. And he talked about that last year. But because he's an established big league veteran, he still gets these opportunities. And he is a pitchability guy that can make some tweaks and adjustments and get right. So for me, I'd be all over this right now. You sign Quintana, You have the same depth that you had entering camp when Montas was healthy. It's the same problems or roster crunch that you would have had trying to decide between Griffin Canning, Paul Blackburn, and Tyler McGill to see who would be in that 6th starter spot. And one of them might be in the bullpen. McGill likely would be in Syracuse. If Blackburn's not ready, well, that solves your problem. Blackburn starts the year on the IL. Canning's your 6th starter. You see how those guys throw the ball. When Blackburn's ready to go, you either slide Canning into the bullpen or Blackburn into the bullpen, or you might just DFA one of them and see if a team claims them. And now it's a problem for somebody else, and you don't have to pay that salary. But to me, I don't see enough reasons not to sign Quintana, or the Mets should not be in on it. But we'll see. If one of these other teams gives him $15 million, I don't think he's going to sign for that much, coming back to the Mets. But I actually think they are really poised here to get him on a team-friendly discount where it might only cost $10 million, or it might be $12 million with a ton of money deferred like JD Martinez last year that allows you to skirt some of the luxury tax penalties. I think if you're looking at the other teams who are bidding, the Rangers and the Padres, if that report is accurate, those aren't teams that have a lot of money to spend. Now, they might have a more clear-cut shot to stay in the rotation all year, particularly in San Diego, but he's familiar with the Mets. He's comfortable with the Mets, and there's, I'm sure, definitely that interest, as Pat Regazza reported, to run it back. One last note on the pitcher front. Clay Holmes will be the starter for the Mets spring training opener on Saturday. He'll be up to 40 to 45 pitches, or he can throw maybe 2 to 3 innings. It'll be great to see what he looks like as a starting pitcher for the first time in a real game. Also, Ronnie Mauricio is feeling great in camp. He got a surgery that I don't even remember if we talked about in the show. I don't think I was ever aware of it. To remove some scar tissue in August, and that has really helped him feel a lot better. He's now 15 months removed from the initial surgery where he tore his ACL, but he is in good spirits. He's hitting the ball hard in BP. He's not going to get into Grapefruit League games early in camp, but should at some point near the end of camp. Likely to start the year in Syracuse because of that ramp up that he needs, and because he still has to shake off a year's worth of rust. But Ronnie Mauricio could be a real player this year, and it's good to know that he has a clean bill of health. One more segment today, though. I want to talk about Starling Marte a little bit. I think he is ideally suited for the role that he's going to serve for the Mets this year. I think we're already seeing that in camp because he is clearly a veteran leader on this team that is widely respected. I want to talk about what I've seen from him so far just in the videos that have circulated on social media. So we're going to go through that in just a minute. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip, you can get in on that fourth quarter comeback. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. What I love about FanDuel is you can actually stay engaged with the game throughout with that live betting feature, but also you get paid out instantly. The app is easy to use. When you win, that payment is there for you whenever you want it. And also, if you want to right now, look at MLB futures. Maybe you want to bet on the Mets to win the World Series, for Juan Soto to win the MVP, or for just the Mets to hit the over on their win total. All of that can be found over at FanDuel. And right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com to join today for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. If you want to be Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, a couple days ago, I sent out a tweet on social media here where I had quote tweeted a video of Juan Soto, Starling Marte, and Jose Siri in a golf cart. And Starling Marte is sitting shotgun, and behind him you have Juan Soto, and next to Soto you have Jose Siri. And they're all joking around and laughing as Juan Soto, who, by the way, looks like he's having the time of his life in Mets camp. It's clear that he was meant to be a Met, not a Yankee. He is relaxed. He's loose. I think he likes the more carefree elements of being a Met instead of the sort of rigid business-like approach of the Yankees. And I think a lot of comfort is obviously taken knowing you're going to be in the same place for 15 years, but it's also a very Latin team. And so that really does suit Juan Soto well. And I think it's bringing out the best of Juan Soto. You're seeing a lot of Juan Soto's personality shine through, like in this video where you see Juan Soto. It's almost like he's rubbing lotion on Starling Marte's bald head as Marte is looking back and he's laughing. Jose Siri's cracking up next to Soto as some reporters are taking pictures and videos are taken. It's a really fun, kind-hearted or light-hearted video of these three. But to me, it does sort of illustrate what Marte can mean to this team. And that's why I tweeted out throughout the salary, what an unbelievable role player the Mets have this year in Starling Marte, a respected veteran who can connect with two young Dominican outfielders, fifth outfielder / DH who can rake versus left-handed pitching and steal bases, far more valuable on the team than he'd be in a trade. There's been so much discussion about Marte getting traded this offseason because he was on the block. It's been reported that the Mets were getting close to a deal that would have sent Starling Marte to the Royals for reliever Hunter Harvey. That deal never came to fruition. Ultimately, the Mets were not going to trade Starling Marte for nothing to just clear some salary, because ultimately for teams that take on salary on an oft-injured 36-year-old, they would have only been willing to take on maybe $4 or $5 million. I mean, some of the reports of trying to get another team to take on half of that salary, I think it's unrealistic. Randall Grichuk got $5 million after a great season, and those two guys are pretty much the same type of player. Obviously Grichuk maybe packs a little more power in his bat, Marte a little more speed. Grichuk probably can handle a corner outfield spot a little bit better. But ultimately, if you're looking at who they are this season, it's guys that are earmarked to primarily face left-handed pitching. And Starling Marte did that to a great clip last year. He hit 310 against lefties, 384 on base, 460 slug. And also when it comes to his ability on the base pass, he was 16 for 17 in stolen base attempts. So there are things that Marte still does well, but not enough that a team is going to take him on for $10 million. So when you think about what the Mets chose to do here, yeah, you could have found a team and you would have sent him to a good destination where he could have played every day potentially. But what were you going to get back? If the Mets got back a quality reliever like Hunter Harvey, I guess I could get my head around that type of a trade. But at this stage, when you see how Marte is interacting with guys in camp, there's no reason to move him. There's no reason to try to sandwich him into a Dylan Cease trade unless that's really what's going to move the needle. And I doubt it does, because ultimately the Padres aren't going to be willing to take on a penny of Starling Marte's contract. And I can't imagine that he's going to be a make or break piece in any trade. So yeah, you could move him, but why? Why move Starling Marte? Because at this point, for the role that he's going to serve for the Mets, he's perfect. Okay, he has had such a great career. He is the active leader in stolen bases in Major League Baseball. He has more career hits than any player on the Mets. That includes, of course, Juan Soto, who just hasn't been around long enough. Pete Alonso. Francisco Lindor is the one guy that's close, and probably will pass him up this year just because he's going to play more and get more hits. But Marte does have, a ton of respect in that clubhouse. He's a two-time All-Star, two-time Gold Glover, a guy that has been a star player in the big leagues for a long time, somebody that can mentor a guy in Juan Soto who, has already accomplished so much. And you are seeing sort of that deference to the veteran with the way these guys are interacting. And it's a lot of fun to watch these guys just having a blast in camp right now. So I think, this was something that I talked about when Juan Soto has introductory press conference. There was two names that he dropped. He said the Mets had the best leadoff hitter in baseball in Francisco Lindor, and he said he'd been in contact with Starling Marte. And it was at that moment that I said Marte is probably not going to get traded. And obviously, we've still discussed it as a possibility. But I've always come back to that idea of, well, what about that relationship with Juan Soto? To me, that is way more valuable than he's going to be in a trade where the Mets are just going to eat salary to clear a roster spot. And this guy can still function on the Mets roster. Let's not forget, Starling Marte hit 277 in the playoffs, got on base at a 345 clip. There wasn't a lot of slug there, but the only Mets that had more hits than Starling Marte in the playoffs, Mark Vientos, Francisco Lindor. The only Mets that drove in more runs than Starling Marte in the playoffs, Mark Vientos and Pete Alonso. Marte drove in 9. So I think about someone that can still rise his game in the biggest moments in October, where you might have a situation where, there's I don't know. I'm trying to think of the lefty that would be up. I guess it could just be Jesse Winker, right? Jesse Winker starts the game at DH, and an opposing team has to think long and hard about bringing in that tough lefty to face Jesse Winker, because then Marte is coming off the bench, and maybe Jesse Winker is hot at the time, so they go to the lefty. Well, the Mets can counter with Starling Marte, and he might get that big hit that wins you a game in the playoffs. But in the meantime, I think this role is really suited to a guy that's 36 years old who has broken down the last couple of years. He's had some really tough injuries. The groin injury that required, was the double groin surgery that was brutal, that, took him out at the end of the, I think he started to deal with it in 2022. The surgery happened after that and basically made him a non-factor in 2023. 2024, he had knee issues. Now you take the burden of playing right field every day and you remove it and you say, all right, you're going to DH against left-handed pitching twice a week. Maybe we're going to, at times, stick you in right field instead of having you DH to get Juan Soto or Brandon Nimmo off of their feet. Maybe he's in left if it's Nimmo as the DH. And he's only going to come in, whether it's facing lefties as a starting DH or outfielder, or facing lefties late in games, or if Jesse Winker's not hitting, maybe he does eat into his playing time a little bit in that platoon. But this is the perfect role for this guy to preserve his career, honestly, and extend it, because if he thrives in this role, there's going to be other teams in the future that look at Starling Marte and say, you know what? We need a short side of the platoon DH. Starling Marte is still crushing left-handed pitching. Let's bring him on. So I think this is great for Starling Marte, even though he probably wants to be in there a lot more than he's going to be. He's going to be able to thrive in this specific role where he's crushing lefties, where he's stealing bases, and where he's being a big presence in that clubhouse, which he's already showing to be. He's one of the leaders on this team. And I think to have this guy on your roster, regardless of the salary, it will make the Mets better in 2025. There's no doubt about that. So at this point, do I think Starling Marte is going to get traded during camp? I do not. I think Starling Marte will fulfill his entire contract with the Mets. He's going to play all 4 years now. And I think there's still a chance that he has a couple more big moments here that might end up being the difference in the Mets winning a World Series this season. You really never know what can happen when the lights are on in October. And this is a guy that's not going to be scared of those moments. In fact, he's living for those moments. So I really think that his addition or his presence on this roster is going to be felt in more ways than one. And I'm happy that we're seeing the early return to that in camp, where Marte is just clearly a great guy to have around. I mean, there was a drill that you saw on social media the other day where Marte was standing on third base and he was basically judging guys as they turned the corner, running home. If they cut the corner good, he had thumbs up. If they were bad, he was messing with them and shouting out and putting his thumbs down. And it was a lot of fun to see. So I really like where Marte is with this club, and I think he's going to have a really nice role this season. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. Barring some more interesting camp notes, which we'll still talk about and sprinkle through every show throughout spring training, my plan for the next 2 days is to give you an updated list of the top 10 prospects in the Mets system. We'll go from 10 to 1. So tomorrow I will break down my top 10, 10 through 6. And then we'll do a show on Saturday where I'll go 5 to 1, breaking down the top prospects in this system. So if you don't want to miss out that show or miss out on that show or any of the other content coming your way, make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Help us get to our next goal of 13,000 subscribers by opening day. If you want to follow me on social media, you can do so at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. We're talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league, by Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.